Linda stepped forward. You resign immediately and take personal responsibility for the financial liability. In exchange, we agree not to pursue legal action for mismanagement, and we keep the media focus on the infrastructure failure rather than your personal issues. You want me to pay $80,000? Karen's voice cracked. You approved the trees against professional advice, Bob said firmly. You changed the pool rules to suit your personal schedule, and you've been using community facilities for private relaxation, which violates the very regulations you've enforced against others. The crowd murmured agreement. Karen could see phones still recording, neighbors live streaming her downfall for absent friends and family. Her public humiliation was being preserved for posterity. But as she looked around at their faces, she saw something she hadn't expected. Not just anger and satisfaction, but disappointment. These people had trusted her with leadership, and she turned that trust into a weapon against them. I need 24 hours to consider, Karen said finally. You have until tomorrow's emergency board meeting, Linda replied. 7 p.m. at the community center. The whole neighborhood is invited. As the crowd dispersed, Karen noticed something odd. Dave Martinez hung back, approaching her door as the others left. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I didn't mean for it to go this far. But maybe this is a chance to start over. Do things differently. What do you mean? Karen asked. Dave glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. That viral video? It's not just about you anymore. It started a whole conversation about HOA overreach nationwide. Other communities are organizing, sharing their stories. You could be part of the solution instead of the problem. He walked away, leaving Karen standing in her doorway with a strange mix of dread and possibility churning in her stomach. Tomorrow's meeting would determine not just her fate, but the future of Willowbrook Heights. But as she closed the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that Dave's cryptic comment held the key to something much bigger than her personal redemption or downfall. 20 minutes later, Karen stood in her marble-tiled foyer, dripping sewage water onto her Persian rug while frantically dialing the emergency plumber. Her husband Gerald peered at her from the top of the staircase, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. Don't you dare say a word, Karen hissed, covering the phone's mouthpiece. And get me a towel. The Egyptian cotton ones, not the guest towels. The plumber's estimate made her stomach drop. $50,000 to fix the burst main line, plus another $30,000 to replace the contaminated pool system. The HOA's emergency fund had exactly $12,000. Karen, Gerald ventured carefully. Maybe this is a sign that. It's not a sign of anything except municipal incompetence, Karen snapped, ending the call. I'll sue the city. This is clearly their faulty infrastructure. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Dave's video had already been shared 43 times in the Willowbrook Heights Facebook group, complete with laughing crying emojis and comments like, calm as a bitch, and maybe she should fine herself for improper pool usage. Karen's fingers flew across her screen, typing a response that would surely restore her authority. As your elected HOA president, I want to address the sewage incident that occurred this morning. While inspecting our facilities for code violations, I discovered a catastrophic failure in city infrastructure that poses a serious health hazard to our community. The doorbell rang before she could finish. Through the frosted glass, she could see the outline of at least 5 people. Karen wrapped her bathrobe tighter and opened the door to find half the HOA board standing on her porch, along with Margaret Chen and 2 other neighbors. Emergency meeting, announced Bob Patterson, the board's treasurer and Karen's most frequent adversary. We need to discuss the us situation. There's no situation, Karen said firmly. Just a maintenance issue that I'm handling. Karen, said Linda Walsh, the board secretary, her voice gentle but firm. You fell asleep in the community jacuzzi. Again. Mrs. Henderson saw you there last Tuesday night too. And there are rules that I wrote. Karen exploded. I am the HOA president. I don't need permission to inspect our facilities. At midnight, in your pajamas, with a bottle of wine. Bob's eyebrows rose to his hairline. Because that's what Mrs. Chen observed last week. Margaret stepped forward, practically glowing with triumph. I have photos from that night too. You were definitely not inspecting anything except the inside of your eyelids. Karen felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. For 3 years, she'd ruled Willowbrook Heights with an iron fist, issuing fines for everything from slightly overgrown grass to the wrong shade of beige paint. She'd made enemies of nearly every neighbor, justified by her unwavering belief that she was protecting property values and community standards. I think, Bob said carefully, we need to call a vote of no confidence. You can't do that, Karen sputtered. The bylaws require that board members act in the community's best interest, Linda interrupted. And right now, you're a liability. The sewage incident is going viral. Channel 7 News just called me asking for a statement. Karen's phone rang. The caller ID showed her insurance agent. Her stomach dropped as she realized the implications. Insurance claims, media attention, potential lawsuits, all because she'd wanted to relax in the Jacuzzi after a particularly stressful day of issuing violation notices. I need time to think, she said, closing the door on the group of concerned faces. But as she leaned against the door, she could hear them talking on her porch, planning her downfall. Margaret's voice carried clearly. I never liked her anyway. Too controlling. Maybe now we can finally get that playground approved. Karen opened the door to find the entire HOA board standing on her porch, along with what appeared to be half the neighborhood. Linda Walsh held a manila folder thick with papers, while Bob Patterson clutched a tablet showing real-time social media metrics that made Karen's stomach churn. 60,000 views and climbing. Bob announced without preamble. 3 news stations, 2 viral content sites, and someone made a remix video set to Another One Bites the Dust. We need to talk. The community has spoken, Karen, Linda said gently, opening the folder. We have 47 signatures demanding your immediate resignation. That's more than 2/3 of the homeowners. Karen's eyes scanned the petition. Names she'd fined for minor infractions. Families she'd denied requests for reasonable modifications. Neighbors she'd alienated with her rigid interpretation of community guidelines. Even the Johnsons had signed, and she'd thought they were allies after she'd helped them get their fence approved. You can't force me out, Karen said, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. The bylaws clearly state. The bylaws also state that any board member who brings substantial negative publicity or financial liability to the community can be removed by majority vote. Margaret Chen interrupted, stepping forward with obvious satisfaction. I helped write those bylaws, remember? Back when we thought we might need them for someone else. The irony was devastating. Karen had insisted on those exact clauses 3 years ago, when old Mr. Peterson had embarrassed the community by getting arrested for public intoxication at the 4th of July barbecue. She'd never imagined they'd be used against her. Look, Dave Martinez spoke up from the back of the crowd. I didn't stop recording to ruin your life. I just wanted evidence of your hypocrisy. But this whole thing has shown us something important about how this community is run. Which is? Karen asked, dreading the answer. That fear isn't the same as respect, said Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman from Pine Street. You've spent 3 years making us all afraid to step out of line, to express ourselves, to make our houses feel like homes. But you never once asked what we actually wanted from our community. Karen looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people weren't a mob. They were her neighbors. People she'd shared community barbecues with, whose children she'd watched grow up, whose concerns she'd dismissed while claiming to protect their interests. The insurance company called, Gerald said quietly from behind her. They're denying the claim. They say the tree root damage was foreseeable and preventable. The number hit Karen like a physical blow. $80,000 in repairs, with no insurance coverage. The HOA's annual budget was only $120,000, most of which went to landscaping and routine maintenance. They'd have to issue a special assessment to every homeowner or take out a loan that would burden the community for years. However, Bob said, his tone shifting slightly, we might have a solution that works for everyone. Karen's head snapped up. What kind of solution? By noon, Karen's life had officially spiraled into chaos. Channel 7 News had set up camp across from the pool, interviewing neighbors who seemed delighted to share their grievances against Heroy Hitler, as someone had christened her on social media. The sewage video had been picked up by 3 local news stations and a viral content aggregator called Neighborhood Drama Wiki. Karen stood at her living room window, watching reporter Jessica Chen, no relation to Margaret, unfortunately, gesture dramatically at the contaminated pool while neighbors lined up to give interviews. She could see Dave Martins holding court near the mailboxes, probably regaling the crowd with stories of her tyrannical rule. Mrs. Whitman. Gerald approached cautiously, holding her cell phone. It's the mayor's office. They want to discuss the liability issues. Karen snatched the phone. This is Karen Whitman, Havoa president of Willowbrook Heights. Mrs. Whitman, this is Janet Rodriguez from the mayor's legal team. We understand there's been a sewage incident in your community, and we're seeing some concerning social media posts that suggest the city is responsible for this disaster. Karen interrupted. Your faulty infrastructure has contaminated our premium facilities, and I demand immediate remediation and compensation. There was a pause. Mrs. Whitman, our preliminary investigation shows that the pipe burst was caused by tree roots from an unpermitted landscape installation, specifically the ornamental cherry trees planted around the pool area last spring. Karen's blood ran cold. She had personally approved those trees, overriding the board's concerns about their proximity to the underground utilities. She'd wanted them for the spring Hehoe newsletter photo shoot. That's impossible, she said weakly. I'm afraid it's not. We have the permits on file. The installation company warned about potential root interference, but the work proceeded anyway. The city's liability is minimal at best. The call ended, and Karen stared at the phone in horror. Not only was she potentially liable for the entire cleanup cost, but she just publicly blamed the city on social media for something that was actually her fault. Her laptop chimed with new email notifications. 17 more messages had arrived in the past hour, all from neighbors demanding her resignation. The subject lines grew progressively more creative. Time to drain the swamp and the pool. Karen must go, and simply resign. The doorbell rang again. This time Karen ignored it, but she could hear voices outside, more neighbors gathering, probably organizing a formal petition. Through the window, she saw Bob Patterson with a clipboard, going door to door. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister in Phoenix. OMG Karen, you're trending on TikTok. Hashtag #SuegeKaren has 50K views. Maybe it's time for that visit we talked about. Karen sank into her leather armchair, the same chair she'd sat in while reviewing violation notices and planning her next neighborhood crackdown. How had it come to this? She'd only wanted to maintain standards, to protect the community she'd helped build. But as she scrolled through the comments on Dave's video, she began to see a pattern. Neighbor after neighbor sharing stories of her excessive fines, her petty enforcement of trivial rules, her refusal to listen to reasonable requests. One comment particularly stung. Maybe if she'd spent less time policing mailbox colors and more time checking infrastructure, this wouldn't have happened. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. She hadn't been protecting the community. She'd been controlling it. And now, covered in sewage and facing financial ruin, she was finally experiencing what it felt like to be on the receiving end of consequences. The doorbell rang a third time, followed by Gerald's voice. Karen, it's Linda and Bob. They say they have a proposal. The stench hit Karen Whitman before she even opened her eyes. Raw sewage mixed with chlorine created an unholy cocktail that burned her nostrils and made her stomach lurch. She bolted upright in the jacuzzi, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair now a matted mess, and screamed loud enough to wake the entire Willowbrook Heights subdivision. What in the? Karen's words died as she took in the scene around her. The pristine community pool deck, her pride and joy as HOA president, was flooded with 3 inches of murky brown water. A massive pipe had burst from the ground near the pool house, spewing raw sewage across the Italian marble tiles she'd fought tooth and nail to install just 6 months ago. But that wasn't the worst part. Standing at the pool gate with his phone held high, recording everything, was Dave Martinez, the same Dave Martinez she'd fined 17 times for his unsightly vegetable garden and non-regulation mailbox color. Well, Dave called out, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Looks like our fearless HOA president took a little dip in the community sewage system. This is going straight to the neighborhood Facebook group. Karen's face flushed crimson, partly from embarrassment and partly from rage. She tried to stand with dignity, but her silk kaftan clung to her body, stained and reeking. Water sloshed around her ankles as she stepped out of the jacuzzi, and she could feel Dave's camera capturing every mortifying second. "Delete that video right now, David," she commanded, using the authoritative tone that had made grown men tremble at board meetings. "This is private property, and you're trespassing." "Actually," Dave grinned, "I'm standing on the public sidewalk, and last I checked, you made the pool area community accessible 24/7 in your latest rule amendment. Remember? The one you pushed through so you could use the facilities whenever you wanted?" The irony wasn't lost on Karen. 3 weeks ago, she'd changed the pool regulations specifically so she could enjoy her late-night jacuzzi sessions without being restricted by the posted hours. Now that very rule was coming back to haunt her. A car door slammed nearby, and Karen's heart sank further as she recognized the click-clack of designer heels on concrete. Margaret Chen, the neighborhood's biggest gossip and Karen's self-appointed rival, appeared around the corner with her morning coffee and a look of pure delight. "Oh my God, Karen," Margaret gasped, though her tone suggested she was anything but shocked. "Are you okay? What happened here?" Karen's mind raced. She had exactly 30 seconds before this disaster became the talk of the entire community. 30 seconds to salvage her reputation, her authority, and her dignity. The problem was, she was standing in sewage water, smelled like a garbage truck, and had just been caught napping in a jacuzzi like some common rule breaker. "There's been a municipal infrastructure failure," Karen announced, trying to regain control of the narrative. "As HOA president, I was conducting an emergency assessment of the situation." Dave snorted with laughter. "At 6 in the morning? In your nightgown? While unconscious?"